My dad raised his glass and toasted his best grandkids, deliberately leaving my son out. Then the laughter started, all because of his condition. Something in me snapped. I didn't stop to think. I slapped him, gathered my son, and we walked out. By morning, my dad was already calling, demanding an apology in the form of a $2,000 payment. The air ripped out of my lungs the moment I saw him, my own father, raise his glass to a backyard full of family, singling out every grandchild for praise except mine. My beautiful, gentle 7-year-old son, Liam, who has autism, stood right there, holding my hand, his bright eyes fixed on his grandpa, waiting for his name. It never came. The scene flickered under the soft glow of string lights strung across the vast backyard, their warmth doing little to thaw the sudden chill that gripped my heart. Laughter, loose and easy, echoed from the other guests, a stark counterpoint to the quiet devastation building inside me. The sweet scent of barbecue and summer night air hung heavy, but all I could taste was bile. And then, there was the searing sting against my father's cheek. The slap was just the match. The real fire, the inferno that consumed everything, began the next morning when he had the audacity to demand $2,000 from me as his apology. From me, the woman who'd been quietly propping up his entire life for a year and a half. So, do you want to know what I did? Stay with me. Let me take you back, let me lay it all out so you understand exactly how we got to that breaking point. My name is Sarah, and I'm 34. I'm still vibrating with the raw energy of that day, not from regret, but from everything that followed. Because that single, desperate act of defiance didn't end anything, it started everything. My parents, David and Carol, live about 40 minutes from me, nestled just outside Raleigh, North Carolina. My dad, David, had been a fixture at a distribution center for nearly 2 decades before the layoff hammer fell about 2 years ago. My mom, Carol, a part-time dental receptionist, has been there so long she practically is the office. They were never wealthy, not by a long shot, but my dad always carried his pride like a booming, untouchable shield. That, I'm the man of this house, energy radiated off him, filling every room he entered, every conversation he joined. My older sister, Jessica, is 37. She's married to Michael, and they have 2 kids, Emily, 9, and Ryan, 6. Jessica is the golden child. Always has been. She married well, her life seems perfectly curated, and her children are, for lack of a better word, normal. I hate that word, I truly do, but it's the one my parents use implicitly and explicitly. They practically worship her. Jessica isn't a bad person, not intentionally. But she's the kind of person who sees a gaping problem, a bleeding wound, and looks meticulously the other way. Because getting involved, truly involved, is uncomfortable. She prides herself on staying neutral, but in situations like mine, neutral is just a polite way of saying, I stood by and let it happen. Liam was diagnosed with autism when he was 3. From that day, the ground beneath my feet subtly shifted. It was slow, insidious, like a hairline crack in a ceiling you don't notice until the whole thing caves in on your head. My mom's first reaction to the diagnosis, as I stood there, clutching the pediatrician's paperwork, was, maybe if you'd been more careful with your diet during pregnancy, Sarah. My dad, David, just nodded, that heavy, condescending nod. Your mother might have a point. That moment, those quiet, devastating words, set the tone for years. Every holiday, every family gathering, the little jabs started. My dad would watch Liam flap his hands, a self-soothing motion, and mutter, "Can't you get him to quit that?" My mom would constantly, relentlessly, compare him to Emily and Ryan. Emily can sit still for an hour. Why can't Liam? Ryan knows all his colors. Why does Liam still struggle with blue? And the worst part? Jessica's kids, my nieces and nephews, picked up on it. Emily, just 7 at the time, told Liam he was broken at Thanksgiving 2 years ago. I confronted Jessica, my voice trembling with rage and hurt, and she just shrugged. Oh, you know how kids are. Ryan once outright refused to sit next to Liam at Christmas dinner. My dad laughed, a dry, dismissive sound. Can't blame the kid. He couldn't blame the kid for rejecting my son. My heart shriveled every time, but I swallowed it. I swallowed the bitterness, the anger, the profound injustice. I kept telling myself they'd come around, that eventually they'd open their eyes and see what I saw, this incredible boy who can name every single train route in his picture books, who laughs with his whole body, a pure, unadulterated joy that radiates from his core, who tells me, "Mommy, pretty," every single morning, even when I feel and look like a drowned rat. I truly believed love would win. I was so profoundly, tragically wrong. Now, this next part is crucial. About a year and a half ago, after my dad was laid off, my parents started spiraling financially. They were behind on the mortgage, late on car payments, and his notorious pride wouldn't let him ask for help. So, who stepped in? Me. I started sending them $800 a month. Every single month. On top of Liam's extensive therapy, my own rent, my bills, everything. I'm a dental hygienist. I do okay, but that money was a real, tangible sacrifice. And do you know how many times in all those months they said thank you? 0. It was just expected. Like some kind of rent I owed them for the privilege of being alive. Keep that in mind. It matters. It matters very soon. So, Uncle Mark's 60th birthday. My dad's younger brother, a kind, gentle soul, turned 60 in April. He and his wife, my Aunt Susan, threw this absolutely gorgeous backyard party. String lights twinkled like captured stars. The smell of catered barbecue filled the air. A live band played soft jazz. Uncle Mark is everything my dad isn't. Kind, patient, warm. He's the one who gets down on the floor and actually plays trains with Liam. Aunt Susan? She actually researched autism. She once called me, out of the blue, just to ask, what does Liam need from us? How can we make him comfortable? That single question, that genuine empathy, meant more to me than anything my parents had ever said. The party started innocently enough. Liam, usually a bit overwhelmed by crowds, stayed close, his small hand tucked firmly in mine. Uncle Mark wore this goofy cowboy hat and kept tipping it playfully at Liam, which made him giggle, a rare and precious sound in a large gathering. I was actually, for the first time in ages, relaxed. That should have been my warning. My dad, David, had been drinking. Hard. By 8 o'clock he was loud, sloppy, leaning heavily on my mom, Carol, who just stood there, smiling vaguely, like always. Then he clinked his glass. The universal sign for a toast. About 35 people stood in a loose circle, illuminated by the flickering tiki torches. The band politely paused. My dad, swaying slightly, an overfull wine glass sloshing precariously in his hand, cleared his throat. And I will never forget this, he slurred, his voice thick with alcohol and self-importance. I want to toast to my family, to my beautiful grandkids. Emily, my princess. Ryan, my buddy. My best grandkids. He paused. He looked directly at Liam, who was still holding my hand, looking up at him, those big brown eyes wide and expectant, waiting to hear his name, waiting to be included. And my dad, David, smirked. Well, he said, drawing out the word with cruel relish, almost all of them. He laughed. A short, sharp, ugly sound. A few nervous chuckles rippled through the crowd. Aunt Susan's face fell, a shadow passing over her gentle features. Uncle Mark slowly, deliberately, set his drink down. Jessica stared at the ground, her neutrality now a visible shroud around her. And Liam, my son. He looked up at me, his innocence shattered. He didn't understand the words, not precisely. But he felt it. Kids always feel it. The exclusion. The cold shoulder. The disdain. Something snapped inside me. Something primal, hot, and utterly unforgiving. I didn't think. I moved. One moment I was holding Liam's hand. The next I was standing in front of my father, my open palm connecting with his face with a sickening crack. His wine glass shattered on the patio, spraying red shards like blood. Dead silence. 35 people. You could have heard a single leaf drop in that stifling quiet. My voice, low and shaking, filled the void. Don't you ever talk about my son like that again. I scooped Liam up, grabbed my bag, and walked out. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. I put Liam in his car seat, climbed into the driver's side, and gripped the steering wheel, my hands trembling uncontrollably. From the back, a small voice, Liam's voice, whispered, "Mommy's sad." I took a breath, a shaky, ragged sound. "No, baby." I choked out, tears finally breaking free, streaming down my face. "Mommy's just strong." I cried the entire drive home. Here's where everything truly, irrevocably changed. I woke up the next morning to 17 missed calls. My mom, Carol, had called 9 times. My dad, David, 4. Jessica, 3. 1 unknown number. The first text from my dad arrived at 6:47 a.m. "You embarrassed me in front of my own brother and the whole family. You owe me an apology. And for the scene you caused, you owe me $2,000. $2,000. For slapping a man who had publicly, cruelly, humiliated my disabled child in front of everyone. He wanted me to pay him." I sat in bed, staring at the message, and I started to laugh. What else do you even do with that kind of absurdity? My mom's texts were worse. "Your father was joking. You know how he gets when he drinks. You need to apologize to him and Uncle Mark for ruining his party. You always make everything about Liam." I always make everything about Liam, him. My son. That is literally my job. That is my entire purpose. I didn't respond to any of them. I got up, made Liam his blueberry smiley face pancakes, his favorite. We watched cartoons and I sat there, stewing, thinking. Because here's what neither of them realized. That $800 I'd been quietly sending every month, the money keeping their mortgage current, keeping them afloat. I had every receipt, every bank transfer record. And right there on my couch, with pancake batter still on my shirt and Liam giggling next to me, completely oblivious, I decided. The last payment I would ever make was last month's. What happened when that money stopped? Oh, I'll tell you everything. Because my dad's reaction was something I could not have predicted. And what Uncle Mark and Aunt Susan did next, that changed the whole game. So I maintained my radio silence that entire Sunday. Not a word to my dad, my mom, or Jessica. I let my phone buzz itself into exhaustion. By evening, the texts had shifted from demanding to overtly threatening. My dad wrote, "If I don't hear from you by tomorrow, I'm coming to your apartment." My mom followed up, a more insidious type of threat. "You're tearing this family apart, Sarah. I hope you're happy." And Jessica, the self-proclaimed queen of neutrality, sent one single message. "Hey, just checking in. You okay?" No mention of what Dad said. No acknowledgement of Liam. Just "you okay?" As if I'd had a bad day at work, not watched my heart get ripped out in front of 35 people. I almost responded to Jessica. Almost. But I knew the second I opened that door, she'd try to play peacemaker, and I didn't want peace. Not yet. I wanted them to sit in it. I wanted them to stew. Monday morning, I did something I'd been putting off for months, something that felt both terrifying and liberating. I opened my banking app, navigated to the recurring transfers, and canceled the $800 monthly payment to my parents' account. Just like that. Tap. Confirm. Done. 18 months of silently propping them up, and it ended with one thumb tap on a screen. I won't lie to you. I felt a pang of guilt, deep in my gut, for about 10 seconds. And then I remembered my dad's sneering smirk, the way he skipped Liam's name, and that guilt evaporated like it was never there. It was replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Now, do you think my parents noticed right away? I figured it would take them at least until the first of the month, when the mortgage payment was due. I figured wrong. My dad called me Tuesday, not even 48 hours later. Not about Liam. Not about the party. Not about the slap. About money. "Sarah," he started, his voice deceptively calm. "I went to check the account, and your transfer didn't come through. What's going on? Did your bank mess something up?" Like it was a glitch. Like there was no possible universe where I would willingly, deliberately, stop paying. "There's no glitch, Dad," I said, my voice steady, though my heart hammered. "I canceled it." Silence. A long, heavy, suffocating silence. Then his voice, sharp with disbelief. "What do you mean you canceled it?" I mean, I'm not sending money anymore. My voice gained strength. You want $2,000 from me for standing up for my son? You're not getting 2,000. You're not getting 200. You're not getting 2 cents. He exploded, yelling. And I mean yelling. After everything we did for you. We raised you. We fed you. We put a roof over your head. And this is how you repay us. The classic script. The greatest hits of guilt tripping. And honestly, normally, that would have worked on me. I'm not too proud to admit that. My whole life, that speech would make me fold. But something was different this time. Something had irrevocably broken at that party. Something that couldn't be put back together. And sitting there, listening to him rage, all I could think about was Liam's face, looking up at me, waiting to hear his name. Dad, I said, cutting through his tirade. You excluded my son in front of the whole family. You humiliated a 7-year-old child, your own grandson. And instead of apologizing, you asked me for money. So no. We're done. You're going to regret this, he snarled. Maybe, I said, my voice trembling slightly now. But not today. And I hung up. Within an hour, my mom, Carol, called crying. Real, performative tears. Your father is beside himself. How could you do this to us? We depend on that money, Sarah. You know that. And then, the line that almost broke me. If you loved your family, you wouldn't punish us over a silly joke. A silly joke. My son being publicly excluded from a toast to his own cousins. A silly joke. I told her I loved her, but I wouldn't be calling for a while. And I hung up before she could say anything else. Because if she'd uttered one more word, one more manipulative plea, I might have caved. That's the honest truth. I'm not some unbreakable superhero in this story. I'm a mom who's terrified she's doing the right thing, trying to hold it all together. Now, here's where things took a turn I genuinely did not see coming. 2 days later, Wednesday evening, I got a call from Aunt Susan. I almost didn't answer. I was emotionally drained, exhausted from the battle. But something told me to pick up. I'm so glad I did. Sarah, honey, she said, her voice gentle and warm. Mark and I need to talk to you. Can we come by tomorrow? Sure. I managed, my voice still feeling fragile. The next afternoon, Uncle Mark and Aunt Susan showed up at my apartment. Aunt Susan, true to form, had brought a casserole. It's like a law of nature. She physically cannot visit someone without bringing food. They sat down at my kitchen table, the scent of cheesy goodness filling the air, and told me something that completely, fundamentally, changed everything. Uncle Mark spoke first, his gaze steady and kind. We saw what happened at the party, Sarah. All of it. And Susan, and I want you to know that we already told your father he's not welcome at our home until he apologizes to you and to Liam. I was floored, utterly shocked. Uncle Mark and my dad, David, are brothers. They've been close their entire lives. For Mark to shut that door, to draw that line in the sand, was monumental. But that wasn't the part that truly rattled me to my core. Aunt Susan leaned forward, her eyes filled with a compassionate sadness. There's something else, honey. After the party, we started talking to some other family members. Your dad has been telling people that you're the reason he's struggling financially. He's been saying you promised to help and then held it over his head. He even told your cousin Ethan that you make him beg for every dollar. The floor dropped out beneath me. I had been silently, quietly sending them $800 a month for a year and a half. Never told a soul. Never bragged. Never even mentioned it to Jessica. And my father, David, was out there painting me as the villain, claiming I was withholding money, making him beg for it. The betrayal was a fresh, searing wound. Uncle Mark shook his head, a look of profound disappointment on his face. I know your dad, Sarah. I grew up with him. He's always rewritten history to make himself the victim. But this time he went too far. And Susan and I aren't going to sit by and let him do it. And then Aunt Susan said something that made the tears I'd been holding back spill over, right there at the kitchen table, mixing with the steam from the casserole. Liam is perfect. And anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve to be in his life, including your father. I didn't even know how to respond. I just sat there, tears streaming down my face, hot and silent. Then Uncle Mark told me their plan. "I'm going to call David," he said, his voice firm. "I'm going to tell him exactly what I think, and I'm going to make it clear that if he wants a relationship with his family, with me, with Susan, with you, with Liam, he needs to get his act together. No excuses. No, I was drunk. No blaming you." And he did. That Friday evening, Uncle Mark called my dad. I wasn't on the call, but Uncle Mark recounted it to me later. And honestly, it was brutal. He told my dad that what he did at the party was the most shameful thing he'd ever witnessed. He told him the $2,000 demand was disgusting. And then he said something that apparently made my dad go completely silent. "David," Uncle Mark stated, his voice heavy with disappointment, "your daughter has been carrying you financially for over a year. She never told anyone. She never asked for credit. And you stood up at my birthday and humiliated her child. What kind of man does that?" My dad had no answer. Now, you would think that would be the turning point, right? Father gets a wake-up call from his own brother, breaks down, calls to apologize, everybody hugs. That's how it would go in a movie. This is not a movie. My dad's response to Uncle Mark was, "You don't know the full story. Sarah exaggerates everything." And he hung up on him. When Uncle Mark told me that, I wasn't even surprised. That's the thing about my dad. He will go down with the ship before he admits he was wrong. And my mom, Carol? She backed him up like always. She told Aunt Susan that Mark was overstepping and should stay out of it. So now we had a full family divide. Uncle Mark and Aunt Susan were firmly on my side. My parents were dug in, stubborn, and unyielding.
And Jessica?
Right in the middle, still refusing to pick a side, which at this point was starting to feel like a side in itself. And speaking of Jessica, something happened with her that I need to tell you about because it involved her kids, my niece and nephew, and it forced a conversation I'd been avoiding for 2 years. Jessica called me that Saturday afternoon. "Can I come over?" she asked, her voice uncharacteristically small. "Without Michael? Without the kids? Just us." I said, "Fine." She showed up, sat on my couch, and for the first time in this entire mess, she actually looked uncomfortable. Not her usual above-it-all composure. She looked like she had something heavy to say and no idea how to say it. Finally, she took a shaky breath. "I need to tell you something. After the party, Emily asked me why Grandpa didn't say Liam's name. And when I tried to explain, Ryan said, 'Because Liam's weird, right?'" She paused, her eyes welling up. "I didn't know what to say, Sarah. But I realized they learned that from us. From how we've all been acting around Liam." That was the first honest thing Jessica had said to me in years. I didn't yell. I didn't lecture. I just said, "Yeah, Jessica, they did." And I told her that Emily telling Liam he was broken 2 years ago wasn't something kids just say. It was something she absorbed, word for word, from the adults around her. And Ryan refusing to sit next to Liam at Christmas? Same thing. Jessica was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I should have said something at the party. I should have said something a long time ago. I'm sorry. Now, I want to be real with you here. That apology meant something. It truly did. But it didn't fix anything. Because sorry is a word, and words are easy. What I needed from Jessica was action. So I told her that. I said, if you truly mean that, then you need to talk to your kids. Not a 5-minute conversation. A real one. About differences, about Liam, about how treating someone differently because of how their brain works is not okay." She nodded, her gaze earnest. And I could tell she meant it. But meaning it and doing it are two very different things. And I'd been burned too many times to trust a mere nod. So there I was, financially cut off from my parents, backed unequivocally by my uncle and aunt, holding on to a shaky maybe from my sister, and waiting to see if my father would do what he'd never done in his entire life. Admit he was wrong. And then something happened that none of us expected. Something that forced my dad's hand in a way nothing else could have. And it had nothing to do with family, nothing to do with the party. It came completely out of left field. When I found out about it, I sat on my bathroom floor and just stared at the wall for 20 minutes, my mind utterly blank. I'll tell you exactly what it was, because this is the part where everything finally broke open. Remember how I said something came completely out of left field? Here's what happened. About a week after Uncle Mark's brutal call with my dad, my cousin Ethan, Mark's son, texted me. Hey, can I call you? It's about your dad. Ethan is 31, works in IT, and does not do drama.
Ever.
So I knew instantly it was serious. When I called him back, he sounded uncomfortable. Your dad showed up at my office yesterday, Sarah, asking for a $3,000 loan. Said you cut him off, and he's about to lose the house. My father. He drove 45 minutes to beg for money from a nephew he sees twice a year. That's how committed he was to not apologizing. He'd rather humiliate himself in front of Ethan than say 2 words to me. But honestly, it didn't feel like victory. It made me sick to my stomach. Because even after everything, after all the hurt, the thought of my parents losing their home gutted me. That's the insidious thing about toxic family. They hurt you, they tear you down, and you still don't want them to suffer. I almost called him that night, my thumb hovering over the dial button. Then I looked at Liam, asleep in his bed, clutching the stuffed train Uncle Mark had given him. And I put the phone down. Because if I caved now, nothing would change. Liam would grow up watching his mom accept disrespect. I couldn't teach him that. Now here's where Aunt Susan did something truly unexpected, something I didn't even know about until much later. Without telling me, she visited my mom, Carol. Not to fight.
To talk.
She sat her down and said, her voice unwavering, Carol, I love you. But your grandson has a condition. And instead of embracing him, you and David made that boy feel like he doesn't belong in his own family. My mom broke down. Real tears this time. Not the manipulative kind, but genuine, heart-wrenching sobs. And she said something she'd never admitted before. Not to me, not to anyone. I don't know how to connect with him, Susan. He doesn't respond like the other kids. And I don't know what to do. That was actually huge. Because underneath all the jabs, all the comparisons, was helplessness. She didn't know how to grandmother a child with autism. And instead of asking for help, she turned that confusion into cruelty. It doesn't excuse it, not by a long shot, but it explained everything. Then Aunt Susan asked about David. My mom's response shocked me even more. I've been telling him for months he's too hard on Liam. He won't listen to me either. The woman who'd smiled through every party, who'd enabled him for decades, had been pushing back behind closed doors. Aunt Susan's voice softened slightly. He's about to lose his daughter, his grandson, and his brother, Carol. For what? Pride. 4 days later, my mom, Carol, called. Quietly. Sarah, she whispered. Can I come see Liam? Not let's talk. Not your father deserves an apology. He asked to see Liam. She came that Saturday, looking utterly exhausted. And this woman, who complains about her knees every chance she gets, sat on my living room floor and watched Liam play trains for a solid 10 minutes. Then, she picked up a little toy car and, her voice soft and unsure, asked, Which track does this one go on? Liam, without a moment's hesitation, took it from her hand, placed it carefully on the correct track, and said, That one, Grandma.
She broke.
Cried right there on the floor, in front of him. I'm sorry, Sarah, she choked out, her voice thick with regret. I didn't know how to be what he needed, and I made it his fault. I sat down next to her, on the floor, and we cried together while Liam, completely unbothered, continued to drive his trains around us, his little world intact. That's who he is. The world falls apart, and he keeps driving his trains. My dad, though. Different story. 3 more weeks of silence. Through my mom and Jessica, I knew he was angry. Applying for jobs and getting rejected. Mortgage letters piling up. He told people I was vindictive. Told Uncle Mark I was using Liam as a weapon. My son, who can't tie his own shoes, apparently my weapon of choice. Those 3 weeks were some of the hardest of my life. Because anger fades and underneath it, eventually, is just sadness. I missed the dad who carried me on his shoulders at the county fair, who cried at my wedding. I didn't know if that man still existed. Then, on a random Thursday evening, at 8 p.m., my doorbell rang. No warning. I opened the door, and my dad, David, was standing there, in his old, worn work jacket, looking like he hadn't slept in days, his shoulders slumped. In a voice I'd never heard from him before, small, cracked, nothing like the loud, boisterous man at the party, he said, "Can I see my grandson?" I held his gaze. "Are you here as his grandfather?" I asked, my voice steady. "Or as the man who told 35 people he wasn't worth a toast?" His chin started trembling. This proud, stubborn man, who has never apologized for anything in his life, looked at the ground, tears welling in his eyes. He swallowed hard. "I was wrong, Sarah." His voice was barely a whisper. "About Liam. About the toast. About the money. About everything. Mark told me. I'm losing everything that matters. And he's right." I opened the door wider. Liam was in the living room, absorbed in his train show. My dad walked in and sat on the couch, not too close, because I had quietly told him Liam needs space. He just sat there, watching his grandson. After a minute, Liam glanced over. "Hi, Grandpa." "Hey, buddy." My dad's voice was still rough, but softer. They watched trains together. No grand speech, no movie-perfect moment of reconciliation. Just a grandfather finally being still enough to truly be there. Did I forgive him completely? Forgiveness isn't a light switch you can just flip on. It's a slow dimmer. But that was the start. Things changed after that. My dad joined a support group for grandparents of special needs kids. Aunt Susan found it for him. My mom started asking real questions about Liam. Not what's wrong with him, but what is he like? How does this make him feel? Jessica talked to Emily and Ryan. Really talked. Emily cried and said she didn't want to be mean to Liam. Ryan, who's 6, said, "Liam likes trains. I can like trains too. Kids are better than us when we let them be." My dad got a job at a local hardware store. Not glamorous, but honest. He never asked me for money again. I started helping a little eventually, not $800 a month, and only because I wanted to. Uncle Mark and my dad had dinner in June, just the two of them. Mark told me later that my dad said, "I almost lost my daughter and my grandson because I was too proud to admit I was scared of a boy I didn't understand." It broke my heart and healed it all at the same time. Last month, 4th of July at Uncle Mark's house, the whole family was there. And when my dad stood up to toast, he said, his voice clear, looking at each of us, "To all my grandkids, every single one. Especially Liam, who taught this stubborn old man that different doesn't mean less." Liam wasn't listening. He was too busy eating a hot dog and watching a caterpillar crawl across the patio. But I was listening, and so was everybody else. Do I fully trust my dad yet? Trust takes longer than words. Much longer. But he's showing up. For a man like David, that's everything. You don't owe anyone your peace. If someone hurts your child, you stand up, even with shaking hands. And if they come back, genuinely trying to be better, trying to learn, you don't have to forgive instantly. You just leave the door cracked open just enough to see if they walk through. My dad walked through.
Late. Messy.
Still learning. But he walked through. Liam still drives his trains, still says "Mommy, pretty" every morning. Still has no idea that he changed this whole family by simply being exactly who he is. Thank you for staying with me through this whole story. If it touched you at all, a like truly means so much. And if you've lived something similar, or you see things differently, or you just want to talk about standing up for your child, the comments are yours. I read every single one. Thank you for being here.